My name is Sally Hambright-Belue, and I am an assistant professor in the School of Architecture at Clemson University, where my primary responsibility is instructing and coordinating the first-year design classes. The students in our undergraduate program are getting a Bachelor of Arts in Design, which is a pre-architecture degree. Many of our students go on to graduate school to receive accredited architecture degree and subsequently become architects. But we also have a substantial number of students who go into other design professions. Therefore, we focus on visual language that is used in all design fields. Developing and implementing a strong foundation design sequence is a crucial component of an architecture and design education. When foundation skills are instilled in students' early education, students are better prepared to take full advantage of their advanced design studios and early professional experiences. Today, many times foundational skills are not afforded their importance in a design education. Instead, a focus is put on technology and the fulfillment of functional criteria. Teaching foundations is teaching a student to think critically, a skill every good designer must have. Peter Eisenman says, "Critical composition is how to draw with an understanding of the object that goes beyond any primary perception, to visualize in drawing what can be thought. Seeing, therefore, becomes a way of thinking and drawing, a product of this way of seeing." This presentation presents one method of teaching first-year architecture students using Eisenman's conceptual framework. Eisenman's method of teaching students to see can be learned from looking at his Introduction to Visual Studies course, which is taught to all incoming MArch 1 students at Yale University. The class is built around weekly lectures on notable pieces of architecture, which span from the Renaissance to the modern day. The class is also characterized by a once-a-week pin-up, which is where students pin up their diagrams of the buildings. As graduate students, Eisenman allows students to discover their own way of communicating through diagrams, and the lectures are tangentially, not straightforwardly, connected to the diagramming exercises. Many foundational skills are also not the focus of the course. But taking his class as a starting point, the following presentation shows a similar strategy for teaching visualization to undergraduate students entering architecture. Eisenman's idea of teaching a student to see came from his time spent with his teacher Colin Rowe, traveling through Europe. In the past, traveling with one's teacher was not rare, but unfortunately we do not have this opportunity with each and every student. His travels with his teacher gave him the opportunity to learn to see ideas in forms, which takes practice. And isn't that what architecture and design is? Form embedded with thought, ideas, and meaning. To see these things takes practice, and this presentation will show how this idea has made its way into the first-year curriculum at Clemson University. The curriculum takes students from analyzing grids on a 4x6 index card to analyzing a small building. The curriculum is divided into 4 projects as follows. First, an abstract grid analysis. Second, an existing facade analysis. Third, a handheld object analysis. And finally, a small building analysis. The first 2 projects are inherently 2-dimensional, and the final 2 are 3-dimensional. Criticality, understanding, visualization, thinking, and seeing are focused upon throughout, and the integration of these is the goal. In the first semester, students are expected to learn what an iterative process is, understand the importance and use of high craft, understand and use terminology that is unique to the design disciplines, understand basic visual language and composition, develop graphic and communication skills, and develop good time management skills. In the second semester, students are expected to understand and apply graphic composition and presentation, understand and apply standard graphic conventions and to use them to communicate an idea, develop analytical and observation skills and the ability to communicate these. I will now go through the 4 main projects in the first year. These projects are supplemented by supporting exercises, readings, sketchbook assignments, and other minor projects. But these 4 projects are the main focus. All the other work is done in tight coordination with them. The first project is the abstract grid analysis. The abstract grid analysis is a base for students to learn technique and visual language. There is focus on teaching students to draw a clean, precise line and to cut a sheet of mapboard precisely. The students are simultaneously learning the verbal language of the design field, words such as balance, rhythm, symmetry, etc. In many ways, these drawings are all diagrams of visual ideas. Students learn the basics of time management, and because each step in the process builds upon the previous step, students are introduced to an iterative process. This first project is taken from Jeff Ballmer and Michael Swisher's Diagramming the Big Idea, which is a book that explains how the University of North Carolina at Charlotte teaches foundation design. The remainder of the projects were developed by myself. Students start out with a simple grid that is constructed on the 4x6 sheet, not measured. Second, they start to make relationships and proportional relationships between lines. This quickly moves into figures, then major and minor figures, always understanding the relationship between the figures. Students learn that simple variations can lead to exhaustive results. They're introduced to drawing tools, which pencils to use, how to hold a pencil, how to use a ruler, and other modeling tools. Students learn to understand relationships between lines and forms. They're also introduced to tonal drawing and how to construct plan obliques. This is also the beginning of the understanding of a plan. You can see here some of the models and how they progress on the right. Students have their first verbal presentation with the jury, and at the final review, the students must explain how they made decisions. They are using words such as shifted, aligned, repeat, rhythm, etc. All of these to explain a very abstract and complex final composition, and you can see this here. The second project is the existing facade analysis. The existing facade analysis allows the students to apply the very abstract lessons learned in the first project to a built structure, while simultaneously teaching measure and scale. Students use their bodies as well as proportion and measuring instruments to measure and draw a building on our university's campus. In this series of exercises, the students follow the exact same method as in the first project, only now there is a building that forms the underlay for the grid. Students first find the major and minor grids, then begin to pull out figures on the facade and understand that there are minor and major figures, again always acknowledging the proportional relationships between the figures. Students quickly begin making models of their diagrams. Students look at their analysis using other drawing types such as tone and elevation oblique. They make several models of their analysis, understanding that these are not mere replications of the building, but they are diagrams of the visual ideas they can see in the facade. And finally, students have a final presentation with invited faculty and practitioners. The students explain their analysis, again using the terminology they have learned during the semester. The third project in the sequence is the handheld object analysis. This is also the first project of the second semester. The handheld object analysis continues the work previously, while pushing the students into the three-dimensional realm. The students are asked to look at positive negative space and contour three-dimensionally. To begin, the students merely draw the object. In this case, the student was working with a jewelry box which unfolded to display all of the compartments. Students are working on drawing to a specific scale, they are working on composition, and they're learning drawing conventions of plan, section, and elevation, while simultaneously understanding their object to the fullest. Students then begin paring this understanding down to a contour drawing, another diagram of sorts. They then quickly move to modeling with black annealed wire. This allows students to be introduced to yet another modeling material and to see line three-dimensionally. The final segment of the handheld object analysis involves understanding the object as a collection of positive and negative spaces. Again, this is a diagram. The students must decide what is important and what is not. They continue to understand material properties, and students begin to understand space as a medium, and they learn how spaces interlock. The final project of the first year is the small building analysis. Again, the students begin by drawing the building, focusing on the drawing conventions of plan, section, and elevation. This exercise also lets the students get to know their building. The small building analysis is broken into 3 smaller projects, including negative positive space, movement, and tectonic. These 3 projects focus on common topics in architecture, including autonomous analysis, ephemeral perception, and material tectonic. This allows students to be exposed to some of the major topics in architecture and maybe even to discover the one they have the most interest in pursuing. It is about opening their eyes to the broad field. Up until this project, the assignments have been more structured and students are walked through the process. In this project, students are allowed and expected to take more control of their analysis and the process. This is an analysis of the John Haydock Wall House, and you can see here the student is looking at the positive, negative, and in-between space. Again, students are learning the idea that space can be a medium to work with, and they're learning about how these spaces connect together. They also look at the movement within the building and the perception of that movement. Again, introduced to another modeling material. They're learning to use material expressively. And then finally, students look at a part-to-whole model. So they understand that they have to construct an argument for their analysis, which connects the detail analysis to the whole building analysis. They're continuing to develop in diagramming abilities. Students learn how technique can help to communicate ideas, and again, using material expressively. In conclusion, through initial observation and dialogue with students, it is clear that students are able to better communicate design ideas, understand drawings and models as communication devices, and understand the importance of a conceptual framework in architecture using this redesigned curriculum. They also understand the importance of an iterative process, the importance of time management, and they're able to use terminology unique to the design professions. We still need to work on their drawing abilities, their use of line weight, line type, and section drawings in particular. These projects are also not addressing context, so that is something we would like to add in the future. And we would like to work on the students' use of time management skills rather than just their understanding that they're important. And we would like to make more links between the 4 projects. The next step of this project is to implement a more precise assessment method to determine the effectiveness of the teaching and research grants to support the assessment have already been applied for. This research has potential to help all design schools improve the quality of foundation design education. Thank you very much for watching my presentation.